internet.
तो मुंह से यार
mucous membrane or moist mucosa. They are the more.
Okay, म्यूट कैसे करते हैं?
কলিতা স্যার
आरंभ कर
স্যার আরম্ভ করিম নে
प्लीज स्टार्ट आरंभ कर प्लीज स्टार्ट
very good evening to everyone. With your permission from the principal, Behavioural Barua Girls College, Jorhat, and Honorable President, Zoological Society of Assam, and Honorable General Secretary, Zoological Society of Assam, and in gracious presence of faculty members, head of the department, DCB Girls College, IQAC coordinator, and eminent personalities, scientists, and professors, including former vice principal of Cotton College, who rang me up in the morning to wish success for this webinar. Myself, Shamin, would like to sign in as a moderator for this webinar. In current situation of this stress and agony because of this ongoing pandemic, the silver lining is that we can connect to each other, though virtually sitting apart. And we are fortunate that we can connect with our resource person, Professor Anindya Sinha, sir. So before moving into the webinar, I just would like to mention a few points. The participant shall off their microphone to reduce the background noise while presenting by the resource person. They can also off the video off in case their internet connectivity is poor. That will help in the better streaming. I will have an interactive session. So for that purpose, the participants can unmute themselves and they can enter and ask their questions from himself or herself. Or if they get any problem, they can put their question in the chat box after the session. We will deliver the questions on their behalf. Because of this virtual kind of communication, I would request the participants and viewer to make their questions a little bit specific and brief, so that we do not lose the interest of the webinar, because sometimes it is needed to see the glee on the faces to carry on the talk, maybe by the resource person. But anyway, we'll carry this webinar in that way. And I'm glad to inform you that participants from all parts of the country, including University of Calcutta, Osmania University, Guwahati University, Dibrugarh University, Cotton University, Pondicherry University, ISAR, Mohali, IIT Guwahati, and all neighboring regional colleges have registered for this webinar. So for that purpose, we have to make an alternative link for YouTube so that we can accommodate all the participants. And we're sorry for that, we couldn't accommodate all the participants in Zoom because of the limitation. And there is one more announcement that after this session, there will be a link for feedback, which will be posted both in this platform as well as in the YouTube chat box. And I would request everyone, all the participants, especially students, to fill up the feedback form within the stipulated time period, maybe of 30 minutes. And that feedback form may ask a very specific comment on this particular presentation. And the successful submission of that feedback will ensure the receipt of the e-certificate. And they will receive the e-certificate within a couple of days. So without taking much time, may I request our principal, Dr. Jinamoni Bhia Dora Baido, kindly to inaugurate the session formally. Baido, to you.
Good evening to everybody. On behalf of the organizing committee, I welcome Honorable Eminent Scientist Professor Sinha sir from IISc Bangalore, all the members from Zoological Society of Assam, participants from different parts of our country, and the viewers. It is a matter of great pleasure for us to organize such a webinar with such a great personality. It has always been a matter of curiosity to understand sociobiology and organizational pattern of non-human primates, monkeys and apes being our close relatives. Their adaptational behavior at different environmental conditions, specifically in course of the rapid urbanization, brings many queries on their interaction with humans. Their conservation issue creates a big question in minds of common people at the time of rise of the human-monkey conflicts in different parts of our country. I believe our Professor Sinha sir is a very expert scientist, and his expertization in this field will bring some ideas for participants, conservation biologists, and especially for the young minds I wish success of this webinar on this serious issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Weidho. Thank you so much. So we are now entering into the much awaited lectures by Professor Anindya Sinha. So he's a person that the person doesn't require introduction, and I'm too small to give him introduction to him. Yet I will try a bit, very briefly in 2 lines. I'll just try actually. Professor Anindya Sinha is based at the National Institute of Advanced Studies in Bangalore, India, and is an adjunct faculty at 7 other institutes in India and the United Kingdom. Although he earned a doctorate in molecular biology in 1993 from the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai, having worked on the biochemical genetics of carbohydrate metabolism in yeast. His current research interests are primarily in the area of animal behavioral ecology, cognitive ecology, evolutionary biology, populations and behavioral genetics, urban animal studies, particularly of primates and other mammalian species, philosophy of biology, performance studies, and the intangible as well as the tangible cultural heritage of India. He is also deeply interested in the popularization of biology, and in addition to establishing a master's degree program in wildlife biology and conservation in Bangalore in the year 2001. He has lectured extensively in a variety of educational and research institutions, both across and outside the country. I would like to add something over here. I think Anindya sir won't mind it. Professor Anindya Sinha, most popularly known as the Ranada among the biologists. So it's over to you, Ranada.
Thank you very much, Shamim, for that wonderful introduction. And I wanted to thank Dr. Bhuya also for in welcoming me. And this is indeed an honor to be able to address all of you. And I hope we have interesting discussions. But thank you once again for calling me. So let me begin my work by saying that, it's almost about close to 30 years now that I have been studying non-human primates, and Bonnet macaques is the species that I have studied the most. So today I will talk about one aspect of our work on Bonnet macaques, and as we go along, it will become important. You will realize why I chose to speak on this, because it mixes science with possibly conservation implications, if not conservation directly. Right. Now, I wanted to begin by introducing these 3 species of macaques, which are called the weed macaques. And you have the rhesus macaque on the top, and then the bonnet and then the bonnet macaque in the middle, and the long-tailed or the crab-eating macaque right at the bottom. And the reason why these are called the weed macaques is because they are able to very successfully adapt to almost any kind of environment, both natural as well as human dominated. And interestingly, what we have seen in bonnet macaques, but this seems to be true for the other 2 species as well, in general, they tend to move towards human habitations. They almost seem to be more comfortable living with people than in the forests, and they become terrestrial, so they spend a lot of time on the ground. They are not very arboreal under most circumstances. And the other evolutionary aspect of their lives is that their life histories is characterized by a greater investment in young, right, and lower investment in individual development. So, for example, if you compare their life histories with, let's say, the stump-tailed macaque, or the Sinduria bandor, as it's called in Assamese, the Sinduria bandor or the pigtail macaque, they typically become large-bodied, and they have young much more rarely than you would see in rhesus macaques or bonnet macaques, which are usually small-bodied, reach reproductive age very, very early, and have a large number of infants over the years, right? So it seems almost that the forest macaques and the weed macaques have different strategies, life history strategies, with the forest macaques spending more investment on their own bodies and development and less on their young. So they have fewer young, whereas the weed macaques are small bodied, they reproduce at a very fast rate and produce a large number of young. But where is the future of weed macaques? As Dr. Bhuya pointed out, that in today's world, when gradually humans are taking over many of our environments, even the weed macaques who are able to adapt so well to humans seem to be under threat. And my talk, hopefully, I will be able to tell you that most probably in about 50 to 100 years from now, even these species, which seem to be everywhere, which seem to be pests for many of us, will ultimately perhaps die out. Now, coming to the bonnet macaque, which I have called the road monkey here, you almost do not see wild bonnet macaques in the interior forests anywhere across its distribution range in southern India. And most troops actually become resident along roads that line and run. So you get to see them mostly along the roads. And what has also happened is because they have spread and come into human habitations, there is a kind of an intense love-hate relationship with and with people. The reason why it's love is because, as you all know, many of these monkeys represent to us the gods, right? They represent deities, and we respect them and we treat them very, very with a lot of respect. But on the other hand, they have also started exploring our agricultural lands, our homes, our gardens, and therefore there has been conflict that has slowly come up. And this is what is perhaps putting the bonnet macaques into a bit of difficulty. So although the bonnet macaques seem to have apparently a successful coexistence with the local people in the towns and cities, the intensification of agriculture in the rural areas and in the urban localities, the increasing intolerance of the people seems to be leading to a decline of many of these macaque populations. And I will give you more evidence from our own studies in southern India. Now, the work that I'm talking about here is a project that we call the Bandipur Project, which actually has reached 20 years. And in this project, we have basically, I will of course talk about data over the last 15 years. We have not analyzed the data since after that. And the main questions that we ask in this project is, what are the changes in bonnet macaque society and behavior brought about by interactions with humans over the long term? And secondly, are human macaque interactions affecting the bonnet macaque populations even within our forests, which are protected for their wildlife? Now, let me also say that during this study, we have actually now identified more than 2,000 individuals. We know them by face, and I will talk a bit about their lives. What is also interesting is that none of these individuals are like each other. They are all unique, and I will talk about that a little more as we go along. But I just wanted to tell you that this project over 20 years now is following the life history strategies and the nature of the interactions between the macaques and the people over the long term. Rather than doing short-term studies, we are actually trying to understand them over their entire lives, basically. Right? Now, a quick introduction to the bonnet macaque, though many of you may be quite familiar with the species. This is a species which is endemic to peninsular India, but has a very wide ecological distribution. In fact, it is found right from the rainforest through deciduous forests, scrub jungles, coastal flats, as well as, of course, every town and city in South India, which has its own resident population of the bonnet macaque. Now, the bonnet macaque typically lives in multi-male, multi-female groups of which vary in size from 5 to 75 individuals. Females are what are called philopatric, which means they spend their entire lives in their own natal troop where they are born. And once they reach sexual maturity, they set up strong linear dominance hierarchies. And when I say linear dominance hierarchies, it indicates that when female A is dominant to B and B is dominant to C, A will also be dominant to C. Males, on the other hand, tend to leave their troops, and they usually do it either at the juvenile or at the adult stage. But what is interesting is that emigration or leaving a troop is not invariable. Sometimes they may move several times, sometimes they may stay on after one movement, and we have now seen a number of males who never move. So it's not essential for them to move, which itself is fascinating. Males, unlike the females, set up unstable dominance hierarchies through aggression and coalitions, and they usually have extensive affiliative interactions with each other. In fact, the male-male bonding in the bonnet macaque parallels that of the females. And this is also very surprising because these macaques, just the bonnet, all macaques tend to be female bonded, which means there is strong bonding between the females and not so much between the males. However, the bonnet macaque seems to be an exception in this. And finally, the society is very promiscuous with periodic consortships when males associate with certain females, ample mating opportunities for all individuals. So all males get a chance to mate with all females and vice versa, and a mutual tolerance amongst the males with very subtle female mate choice. And I've shown here now 5 males from 5 of my troops in Bandipur. And of course, I'm sure you notice how fascinatingly different their hairstyles are, right? So they all have extremely different hairstyles, and that allows us to identify them very easily. It's not just the bonnet hair, but also the forehead mark. You will most probably see this white patch on the forehead, and that varies across individuals. But what I'll also like to insist here is that their behaviors are very different from each other as well. They have very, very individualistic life history strategies. And so just as we say that when you see one human being, you haven't seen all, it's true for bonnet monkeys as well. If you've seen one monkey, you haven't seen them all. They're all very different from each other. The other point I want to make is if you now see the points I have made in this slide, I have used a number of words such as usually, generally, not invariable, or unstable, unusually. I've used a huge number of words which tell you that there's a tremendous amount of behavioral flexibility across these individuals. And this flexibility is what makes the bonnet macaque an extremely successful species, because since they have so much of flexibility, they're able to easily adapt to a wide variety of situations. Right. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time, but this work is set in the Bandipur National Park, which is in southeastern Karnataka, bordering Tamil Nadu. In fact, this is a tri-junction of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala, with the Bandipur National Park extending into Tamil Nadu, where it's called the Multimales National Park or the Tiger Reserve. And in the south, it moves into Kerala, and it's called the Wayanad National Park and Tiger Reserve. Right. Now, one of the most surprising findings that happened when we originally went to study the bonnet macaques in Bandipur is that we found a very large proportion of unimale troops. Now, you will remember that I had mentioned that bonnet macaques typically have a multi-male, multi-female society where there are a number of adult males living with a number of adult females. However, when we went to Bandipur in 2000, we found that 11 of the 21 troops, which means almost 50%, 52% of the troops had a very unique unimale social organization, right? So which means that there was one adult male along with a few adult females. Now, unimale troops have never been reported from these populations. And when I went back into the literature, I found that other populations have reported them, but in very, very small proportion, not at all close to the 50%. So half the troops had this different kind of a social organization. And some characteristics of these organizations, they usually have they are stable with adult sex ratio 1:0.25, which means that each troop has a single adult male and 1 to 4 adult females. Secondly, the total group size is smaller than that of multi-male troops, which is the typical organization that we find. And the unimale troops are mainly found in the forested tracts, whereas the multi-male groups are found in both forests and around human habitation. So there seem to be also an ecological variability across these two kinds of social organization. And so an important question that we wanted to ask is what allowed for the development of unimale troops in this population, which is so rare, not only in macaques, but in bonnet macaques itself, right? And so why do we find this social variability in the forests of Bandipur was a question we asked. And here in the rest of my talk, I will give you a model that we constructed to try and understand why the Unimale troops have come up. And within that, we wanted to look at what are the factors that have influenced the development of the Unimale troops. And I will slowly go through the evidence that we have for the different steps of the evolution of these troops. Right? Now, the first point that I wanted to make is that if you look at the ecology of Bandipur, you find that the food in the dry season is very sparse and patchy. Whereas, on the other hand, we have a very large number of tourists who are now passing through the Bandipur forests. And these tourists actually go to Ooty, and on their way to Ooty, they actually give out food to the bonnets. And you may have seen this in other places as well. The tourists like to feed monkeys, but the food that comes from these tourists are obviously very rich, but they are also clumped in distribution. They are found only locally, where a person may throw out a bunch of bananas or a loaf of bread. And what this seems to lead, this kind of an developed ecological pattern of food distribution seems to lead to intense competition between females within troops. So within each troop, which has a number of females in this multi-male, multi-female troops, the females now start competing for these provisioned food resources that come from humans. And when you have this intense competition between females, one of the ways in which tension can be brought down is when the groups split into smaller groups of females. And when you have a small group of female which may leave an entire troop, it may be possible for a single male to take over this small group of females, and this could potentially give rise to a unimale social organization. So this is a model that we suggested in 2005, and the rest of our work was going to be dedicated, and which I will discuss in the rest of my talk, was dedicated to finding evidence to see whether it's true that this pattern that we are seeing is indeed true or not. The factors that we have suggested may have led to this new form of social organization. Do they really operate? And that is what I want to talk about now. Now, so the first step, of course, would be that if you have provisioned food from tourists, which is rich and clumped, is it possible that this has indeed led to intense competition between the females within these troops, right? And here, the evidence actually comes from the work of a PhD student of mine, Mayuk Chatterjee, and what he found, and I'm just summarizing his findings. I'm not going to give you the data because there is no time, but these are the conclusions I wanted to talk about. First, we found that when you go to forest troops, they have much larger home ranges than the provision troops, where people give them food. So their home ranges are much smaller. And that's possibly because the provision troops have much easier access to rich anthropogenic food sources. When you then move to competition over food, which is what we were talking about, we find that during the dry season, multi-male troops tend to increase their home range much more. Dry season is when food is limiting. And under these conditions, the multi-male troops tend to increase their home range much more than the single unimale troops. And the larger troops, whether unimale or multi-male, tended to be much more food limited during times of food scarcity. So food was always a problem for them. To find food was always a problem for the larger troops. And finally, when Mayuk looked at inter-troop interactions, he found that different kinds of competition. Scramble competition. In scramble competition, basically, one troop starts moving away when another troop comes and takes its place. And so they don't directly interact, but they keep replacing each other at food sources. And in contest competition, what seems to happen is that there is a direct aggression and conflict between two troops. And what we found was this competition was much stronger for provision troops over human food resources than for forest troops. And interestingly, the inter-troop encounters were invariably initiated by the multi-male troops at much higher frequencies than by the unimale troops. So these this kind of evidence seemed to show that competition was perhaps much more stronger amongst the multimale groups or amongst the larger groups. And we went ahead to look for more evidence of this competition. And so if indeed we do have provisioned food from tourists leading to increased competition, which we have now shown that there seems to be more feeding competition, does this actually lead to intense competition between females within a troop? Right? So far, I was talking about the relationship between the multimale and the unimale troops, but what about within a multimale troop, within a unimale troop? What is the kind of competition that you have when people give food to these monkeys, or in the dry season when food is fairly scarce? And here in this graph, I have shown on the x-axis different kinds of aggressive behaviors shown by females towards the others, towards other females in the same group. And the white bars here are those under conditions of natural foraging, whereas the black bars are under conditions where people are providing food and the monkeys are scavenging. And what you find is whether you look at total aggression, non-contact aggression, contact aggression, aggressive approach, feeding supplant, in which one macaque replaces another macaque and takes away the food, or retreat, all of these behaviors are shown at much higher frequencies under conditions of provisioning or scavenging. When they are feeding on garbage dumps or when people are feeding them, the competition between them across different kinds of aggression goes up severely. This for females. Right? And this is particularly within one particular troop that was studied by Sunita Ram, who did a master's dissertation with me in Multimales. So there is a significant increase in aggression on provisioning or scavenging. Now, we wanted to then look for the effect of provisioning as well as the effect of seasonality on these aggressive encounters between the females in Bandipur. And what we found was that there was a significant increase in aggression on provisioning in both multimale and unimale troops. So when you gave food to both multimale and unimale troops, there was an increase in aggression, but there was no increase in feeding supplants in the unimale troops. So the unimale troops seemed to be protected from too much of competition. At least individuals were not losing their food to other individuals, females, when food was given to them. When we looked at seasonality, there was a significant increase in aggression in the dry season over the wet season. As I told you, in the dry season, food is very scarce. But in the dry season, we were finding an increase in aggression as we would expect. But interestingly, it was only in the multimale troops. And therefore, we found evidence that this intense competition between females within troops was actually happening. But the next step in our model is that, is this competition actually leading to smaller groups of females? Our hypothesis was that when aggression goes up tremendously within a group of females, it may be possible that the females will now lower tension by breaking up into smaller groups. It's a bit like, if I may compare it, with a joint family system, which used to be the common practice in early India, which has now started breaking down into nuclear families, primarily because of the levels of competition or perceived competition that seems to be going up, right? So when you have brothers living together, there is often competition between the brothers over their earnings. There is conflict over who will contribute more, who will contribute less. There may be competition amongst the wives of these brothers, and with the result that you break up into smaller nuclear families. So there may be more difficulties there, but at least you have peace. Is this what is happening with the bonnet macaques as well? And are we seeing smaller groups of females as a result of this competition? And the data comes actually from our work in Bandipur, where we have shown that over these 15 years, there were 10 events of troop fission. Now, remember that the bonnet macaque is a female bonded species. I mentioned to you earlier that females never leave their natal troop, but continue to stay in their troop all their lives. But here in 15 years, we saw 10 events where actually the females were breaking apart, right? And so we saw 7 of the 30 troops between March 2000 and September 2015, showing these 10 events. And what happens in these fission is where 2 to 4 females, which comprise roughly 25 to 60% of the females in the resident troop, leave the group. They're usually accompanied by one or more adult and subadult males and their dependent young. Now, this is, I've written here, that this is an extremely high rate of group fission amongst females, which is rarely recorded earlier in any female bonded primate species anywhere in the world. So clearly, this was an extremely unusual happening that we were seeing in Bandipur. Right? And so the significant dispersal by individual females has been reported for the first time in Bonnet macaques. The female migration is very common across troops that we were seeing in Bandipur. Of course, males migrate to a much higher degree, but females tend to migrate less. But we saw of the 919 females that we observed over these 15 years, 44 of them, which is 5% of the total females, seem to show emigration. And these 44 females belong to 9 of the 21 troops that we were monitoring, which means 43% of the troops actually showed female emigration, right? And the point I also want to make here is that though I have no time to discuss it, the troop fission could of course be when the group splits, with some females leaving along with the males, as I mentioned, some males. But there are also departures of individual females who often leave a group and move to another troop singly, right? They don't leave in a group often. And so what we were seeing indeed is that possibly due to the intense competition between females within troops, there was group fission with female emigration, and females were then leaving. But there was also emigration of individual females from these groups. And this then led to smaller groups of females being formed. But if there are indeed smaller groups of females that are being formed, is it possible that these females are now being reproductively controlled by a single male? Now here, let me just digress a bit to tell you why in deciduous forests of Bandipur and Karnataka, most of the primates that you see, whether langurs or macaques, are multi-male, multi-female. The reason is very interesting. Typically, the deciduous forests are very dry in the summer and food is limited. However, with the coming of the rains, we have much more food production in the forests, young leaves, buds, flowers, fruiting. And this is the time when all the females want to have their young, because food is abundant at this time and competition would be less amongst them. But what then happens is, because we have marked seasonality in the deciduous forest, unlike in a rainforest, what you would find is that all the females come into season together. And this is called explosive breeding. All of them are ready to mate and give birth to their young. And when all the females in a population come into season roughly at the same time, it's not possible for one male to guard females, and therefore you end up with all the males coming together to actually mate with all these females, and you end up with multi-male, multi-female troops. That's the reason. Let's look at the lion-tailed macaque, for example, in the Western Ghats, in the rainforests. There, what you have is food abundant throughout the year. When food is abundant throughout the year, females are not competing with each other. In fact, what they would then want to do is to reduce competition even further by reproducing one after the other. They don't want to coordinate their reproduction because food is available throughout the year. It doesn't matter when you reproduce. And when you have females living together in a female bonded society where they come into season one after the other, it's possible for one male to guard them, right? And therefore you end up with a situation like the pig-tailed macaque, or the lion-tailed macaque, the pig-tailed macaque of Assam, or the lion-tailed macaque of the Western Ghats, where you find you have a single male, all the organization is unimale, or at most with 2 males, right? But bonnet macaques, because they're in the deciduous forest, like the rhesus macaques, end up in a multi-male, multi-female system. So when you now have a small group of females forming as a result of this fission, is it now possible for a single male to take over and guard reproduction of these small groups of females? And that's what we wanted to find out whether it's true. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the behavioral profile of the single male in the unimale group with the alpha male, which is the most dominant male in the multimale, multi-female group across a variety of traits, right? And so the comparison is between the adult male of a unimale group with an alpha male of a multimale group, because they are roughly comparable, right? They are the most, in this case of the unimale troop, of course, there's only one adult male. But in the case of a multimale troops, there are several, but the alpha male is in the most dominant position. Now, when you look at reproductive monopolization, of course, as I mentioned to you, in the single male troops, the unimale troops, the single adult male completely monopolizes all the females because there is no other male. So his competition, in the competition, he's very strong and he's the only male who's reproducing. However, when you go to the alpha male in the multimale group, although he's the most dominant male, he cannot monopolize all the females because they come into season all together. And so therefore, all the other males are also able to reproduce and there is no reproductive monopolization. When we looked at aggression shown by these adult males towards subadult and juvenile males in the group, we found an amazingly different pattern where the single male in the unimale group is very, very aggressive towards even his own sons, and he will drive out all the subadult and juvenile males in his group regularly, right? However, the alpha male never does that. An alpha male is very, very tolerant in a multi-male group and is absolutely accepting of other males not only joining the group, but also the other males who are born into the group. Related to this, we also found this herding behavior, which was very common. The adult male would actually guard its females, drive them along, and this is called herding. However, and you see this in the, interestingly, in the pigtailed macaques and in the lion-tailed macaques, but the alpha male in a multi-male group would never, ever herd females. Sometimes when there was an association between one female who was in season and the alpha male, he might guard her for a few minutes, hours, maybe a few days. But in the case of the unimale group, the adult male herds the females right through every day over years, right? The next point we wanted to look at is what happens when the troop meets another troop or individuals want to come into and join the group. And what we found was that when there was inter-troop interactions, the alpha male, the single male in the unimale group was extremely aggressive and would actually inflict injuries on challengers from other groups. And this was so common that whenever we found an injured male or a dying male, we knew that the attacker was a single male from the unimale group, right? On the other hand, the alpha male in a multi-male group would never show this kind of defense, troop defense. In fact, they were like the Maharajas that we see in pictures. When two groups came together to fight, in a multi-male group, the alpha male would sit far behind with all the females looking at the battle, and only if his group lost, he would run along with the females. He never participated in the fights, unlike the single male in the unimale group, who of course has no choice. He's the only male there. He has to fight. And final point is that when other males try to come and join these groups, we found that there was active prevention of immigration by the single male in the unimale group, but this never happened in the multimale group. So interestingly, I don't have the data here. I wish I had included the data. What you find is that if you plot on the x-axis the number of resident males in the group, and on the y-axis the probability that new males will come and join this group, what would you expect? You would expect that more males would come and join the unimale groups, because in the unimale groups, for every one adult male, there are 3 or 4 adult females. Whereas in the multimale groups, for every male, there is 1.2 to 1.5 females. So it makes much more sense to join the unimale groups. And yet, when you actually plot the data, you find that the way there's a strong positive correlation with hardly any males joining the Unimale group and most males joining multimale groups. And the reason for this is that new males cannot find a position in a Unimale group simply because the single adult male completely drives them away. Whereas in a multimale group, there are already a large number of males. If when more males come in, there is no response from the males to keep them out. It doesn't matter. If there are 10 males, how does it matter if there's an 11th or a 12th male? However, if you're in a unimale group, a second male or a third male makes a lot of difference in terms of your reproductive monopolization. And that seems to be the result. But what I want to take home, what I want you to take home from this is that look at the complete difference in the behavioral profile between the alpha male in a multimale group and a single male in a unimale group. It's almost as if we are seeing a genetically new kind of a male, or maybe it's cultural. And we will discuss this a little more as I go along. But for the time being, it does seem to be very clear that when you have a small group of females, there is indeed reproduction, monopolization of reproduction by a single male. And this in turn leads to a unimale social organization. Now, let me briefly go back. So I hope I have been able to convince you that perhaps the model that we had put up for the Unimale social organization and its evolution seems to be supported by the kind of evidence that we have, right? But when you have a kind of dynamics like this, there are two important points that I want to talk briefly about. One, the first point that I talk about is phenotypic flexibility in social behavior. Now, remember, when I showed the behavioral profiles of the single male in the unimale group and the alpha male in the multimale group, and we saw this stark difference in behavioral profiles, one possibility is that there is natural selection for aggressive males, right? We do know that there is a genetic variability in perhaps even in aggression across the males in a population. And it may be that when there is a small group of females, it may be possible perhaps for one aggressive male to take over this group, right? So it could be genetic working under Darwinian selection. On the other hand, we are now increasingly realizing that many mammalian species, and perhaps even birds or reptiles or amphibians, seem to have a kind of flexibility in their social behavior that of the kind that we see in humans. And this is called phenotypic flexibility. And so the ability to move across behavioral profiles, change your behavior when you get into one situation from what you were in another situation. And this could be physical, physiological, it could be social. Under these conditions, when you have this flexibility, that is what we call phenotypic flexibility. And in the work that we have done, and in the story that I've just told you about Bandipur, we indeed see remarkable phenotypic flexibility. So if you look here, there is an unpredictability in food abundance and distribution, which comes about either because of the summer dry season distribution of food, or because tourists may sometimes give food, may not give food, can provide different kinds of food. But when you have this unpredictability, one factor that we showed you was this group fission with female emigration, so that you end up with smaller group size. Independently, what we've shown, and I've not had time to discuss this in this talk, is that when you have unpredictability in food abundance and distribution, there is also a flexibility in female social strategies. If you remember the first slide where I showed that Sunita Ram, my student, had shown that for one particular troop, as it moves from natural foraging to being provisioned, there is a stark increase in aggression. What is also true for them is that their affiliative strategies, their allo-grooming strategies seems to change. So when you have competition increasing because of tourists giving you food, subordinate individuals now start showing aggression towards dominant individuals. And not only that, the dominant individuals now stop grooming subordinate individuals. But subordinate individuals continue to groom dominant individuals, because if they are able to do so, the attacks on them over food comes down. So female social strategies are also very, very flexible. It may depend on their dominance, but it may also depend on the kind of food abundance or distribution that is there. If you move to the right side of the figure, of course, what we've shown is that when you have group fission with female emigration and smaller group size, there is a flexibility in male behavioral and emigration strategies in groups with varying number of females. So males themselves, whether they will emigrate or not, whether they will do it solely or differently in groups, changes depending on the kind of females that are there and the number of females that are there in the groups. And finally, what we've also shown is that this flexibility in male behavioral strategies, where some are able to take over a unimale and form a unimale group, some who are not able to, also leads to female emigration strategies. And this flexibility is remarkable. Females can leave in groups, they can also leave singly. But what I hopefully you realize from this entire pattern is that each individual has a number of behavioral choices, a number of life history choices that he or she can choose from. This is not genetic change. We are not talking about change that goes across generations. We are talking about behavioral changes that take place within one generation, within the lifetime of an organism. And this is what is called phenotypic flexibility. And typically in phenotypic flexibility, we have the ability of individuals to actually adjust their behavior depending on the social situation. Let me now move to the second aspect of it. And if there are any questions or if you have any doubts, we can talk about it in the discussion. When we move to the second aspect, which is of that of individual behavioral traits, we are also now seeing that this phenotypic flexibility in behavior is giving rise to culture, social traditions. And we have now documented extensively social traditions or behavioral traditions of various kinds in these populations, right? And I, again, don't have too much time to talk about this in detail, but here what I have listed, and the rapid spread patterns are behaviors that one individual learns, and it quickly spreads throughout the group, but not entirely. So some individuals now start following this behavioral tradition, whereas others may not. And we've seen mango washing, where individuals are washing wild mangoes in water. And I will show you a little video clip of this soon after. There is bipedal requesting of food, where individuals stand up, and it's shown here, where individuals stand up on their hind legs and request food from passing cars. And what we've shown is that often in some troops, it's one individual who starts showing this behavior, and the behavior then starts spreading through the troop as more and more individuals learn how to do it. Some of these individuals come into the car and they raid cars for food. We've also seen some very rare behaviors such as adoption of orphan young by subadult males. We've seen two events of this. And what was fascinating is after these subadult males adopted the orphan, one in each of these troops, the juvenile males in the group had developed a tendency to carry infants, which only female juveniles do. Male juveniles never do, right? And male juveniles were trying to now carry infants. We have seen patterns of culture in tool use and manufacture. And the parent offspring patterns, which is the second category, is when young learn from their mothers certain behavioral traits, and this then spreads across these individuals, but only within the matriline. So it is spread from the parent to the offspring. So for example, in GKVK, where we began our work, there was one female, only one adult female amongst a group of 11 females, who came to the kitchen window and started begging for food. What was fascinating is over the next 3 years, juveniles started doing the same, but only her offspring came and started giving these coo calls requesting for food. Now, is this a genetic trait that has gone from mother to young? Or is it that the young have learned from their mother how to do this coo calling and requesting for food? Is something we don't know yet. But allogrooming patterns, for example, young females learn from their mothers who the favorite allogrooming partners are, and that they continue to practice even in the absence of their mothers. So here is a cultural transmission. It's almost like saying that my father's or my mother's friends' children will become my friends because I've seen our parents being friends, right? So it's a culture that gets spread, and we see this in the Bonnet macaques as well. And finally, the last group of traditions that we see is group specific, where one group has a particular foraging style. In the same locality, another group, most probably they are even related individuals, have a completely different foraging style. In aggressive branch shaking, we found that in GKVK, one of the troops, when females were showing aggression towards each other, they would shake branches. But none of the other females in the other troop with which it shared a home range would ever show this behavior. So clearly these are cultures and behavioral traditions that seem to be going from generation to generation. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because these cultures start off simply because of the phenotypic flexibility that exists within these individuals to be able to adjust to new situations. And through social learning, these behaviors are then passed on from generation to generation. So let me, I hope this video will work. Let me now show you. So before I show it to you, here you can see two males. It was actually a group of 5 brothers. It was a bachelor group of 5 males who left their natal group and came to live by the river Moyar, which separates Bandipur and Multimales at a certain point. And what we found was that 2 of these brothers, 2 of these 5 brothers, suddenly developed this new habit of washing mangoes. Now, these are raw mangoes or ripe mangoes, but they are wild mangoes. And they would float down the river, and often they would be covered by slime. And what these 2 brothers learned was to take the mangoes and wash them in the water, possibly to remove the slime. But I have tasted the mangoes and they are very astringent. So you will see one of the monkeys, even while eating the mango, washing it, possibly to remove the sap and the other astringent materials that's there in this in the mango. All right, so let's just watch this, and I'll narrate what happens with it. So here is the monkey carrying the mango, and he sits and he washes it. Right? And while he's washing it, now you will see he eats it and then he washes it again. But with his left hand, he will remove some dirt now from the mango. He will remove some dirt and he will wash his hand in the water. So there, he's washing his hand in the water. So clearly he uses water as a tool. And then while eating this mango, he keeps it under his foot and loses it. And so now he's searching for it, which tells you cognitively that there is a model, a mental model against which he's comparing and looking. He's feeling for the mango under the water. So he knows exactly cognitively what that mango looks like, and he's feeling for it. And he can't find it, and suddenly he finds it again and washes it once again. Right. So, so therefore, what this therefore tells you is that the macaques that we are seeing seem to have a remarkable behavioral flexibility, both socially, culturally, as you can now see in terms of mango washing, and in a variety of contexts that make them extremely adaptable to human populations. However, what we've also shown you is that human interactions with macaques, including the simple act of feeding monkeys. Right? So a lot of people monkeys because they think it's punya, or they think that the monkeys need the food, and therefore they offer food to them. But what I've shown you now is that even when tourists come into the forests and feed monkeys, it can have profound effects on their behavioral ecology. And what we've shown you is that this can be at 2 levels. One is at the level of the society, and one is at the level of the individual. Bonnet macaques, therefore, appear to be unusual in exhibiting remarkable social flexibility, a wide variety of individual behavioral strategies, cultural traditions established through social learning, all of which allow them to successfully adapt to different socio-ecological habitats, including difficult anthropogenic regimes where humans are changing the habitat significantly, right? And so where lies indeed the future of these macaques? And I will conclude my talk with just a couple of points about what we seem to be happening, what we see seems to be happening to the macaques. Now, the first point that I wanted to say is that over this period of 15 years, we have now seen that 7 of the 11 Unimale troops that we saw, 64% of them have now disappeared. But the 10 multimale troops we saw at that time, 15 years ago, continue to remain even today, right? So clearly, unimale troops seem to have a lower probability of survival. And we think there are 2 sets of processes, one of which is statistical and one which is biological, which is possibly responsible for the differential survival of these 2 forms of social organization. Now, when you have a very small group, as in a unimale group, even if 1 or 2 individuals disappear from the area or they die, the group finds it difficult to survive anymore simply because they are now left almost solitary with just 1 or 2 individuals. And therefore, this is a statistical problem. On the other hand, it could also be a biological process because of the kind of behavioral interactions that characterize the unimale organization. What we saw was that there was a despotic behavior of the single adult male who would continuously drive away the younger males in the group, the juveniles or the subadults. And this was possibly costly because these young individuals, when they leave the group, they're forced to leave the group, fall prey to leopards and jungle cats and other predators much more easily, right? So in some sense, being a male in a unimale group, if you're not the single male, adult male, it's a great threat to your chances of survival. Also, what we have now seen is that when individual females leave singly, they often leave unimale groups, possibly driven by the fact that in a small unimale group, there are not enough females with whom they can groom, or they don't have a mate choice. So what we are now seeing is that single females from unimale groups are gradually leaving and joining multimale groups. And in the process, there is possibly a cost of being killed by predators, right? And the final point is that when you have large groups which are continuously breaking up into smaller, unstable unimale groups, this possibly affects the survival probability of a very large section of the groups, right? You have large multimale, multifemale groups, they break up into smaller unimale groups, and these then die out. And then you have again smaller unimale groups forming again because of people feeding these monkeys, and those die out again. And so we are possibly, and we don't have the data right now, we have not analyzed it, we are perhaps losing monkeys to this kind of a process. And so what I would like to suggest is that we should do more detailed ecological and behavioral studies of wild, semi-urban and urban bonnet macaques, as well as rhesus macaques in Guwahati, for example, because we need to understand what are the consequences of human activities on their lives and survival. And we definitely urgently need effective management strategies for these species in protected areas with tourist wildlife interactions, because even within a forest, in a protected forest, they are not safe. In fact, recently in Bandipur, the forest department themselves have started trapping monkeys and removing them because the tourists complain about being bitten by them. But then the tourists must realize that it's because they provide food to the monkeys that the monkeys become aggressive. And so if nobody fed the monkeys, they would not become aggressive. And in urban areas where there is severe human-primate conflict, there's almost very little hope for the survival of the species. Those of you who are from Guwahati or perhaps from other cities in Assam where you have rhesus macaques, I'm sure you must have noticed over time that these macaques are decreasing in numbers. We may not think they are, but actually, as we show in these bonnet macaques, they are indeed decreasing in number. And perhaps, therefore, the time has come to even consider these so-called pest primate species, these macaques. We should perhaps think of conservation action for them. So I want to end my talk by thanking a variety of collaborators. Kakule Mukhopadhyay has been my long-term collaborator, and we've been studying the bonnet macaques in Bandipur for the last 20 years. We also have Anirban, Moyuk, and Sunita Ram, who I mentioned earlier. and they have contributed to this work. I also wanted to thank my organization, National Institute of Advanced Studies, Nature Conservation Foundation, who supported me in this work, the Venagran Foundation, DST for support, and the University of Agricultural Sciences and the Department of Forests of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu for giving me permission to work there. I want to end this talk actually with a poem. And I want to tell you this poem because I think sometimes, I gave a 1-hour talk on the plight of the monkeys, but sometimes I think poetry expresses them so much better. And here is a poem that, let me first show you. It's very interesting. It's about interspecies communication. And let me read it. When the monkey on the bough of the jackfruit tree in the town's commons mistakes for fruit the eye on the thronged drumheads hung up there by mendicant bards, he taps on it, and the sound rouses the male swans below to answering song. So here clearly is interspecies competition where a monkey makes a noise by beating on a drum, and it arouses the swans which are below the tree, and they reply back. Right? Of course, passively behind all of this is the human, because if there was no human, there would be no drum on which the monkey would beat. But also remember that the monkey is in the bough of the jackfruit tree in the town's commons. But what is fascinating about this poem is that it's written by a poet called Muttamochiyar, and he is from the Tamil Sangam period of South Indian literature, which is almost 2000 years old. So 2000 years ago, we had monkeys living in the jackfruit tree right in our backyard. So for 2000 years, we have lived with these so-called weed macaques. But today, even today, we know so very little about them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It's
sorry.
pattern our thoughts.
I may have taken up a bit more time than I should have.
Perhaps. No, sir. No, sir. It is absolutely within the time frame, and you can even can extend it if you wish.
No,
I think it is within the time.
Let's have discussion. So I see quite a bit of question in the chat box.
Yes, sir.
So would you like me to address the questions in the chat box first, or what would you like?
Definitely, sir. So if the students wish to communicate directly, I think they may feel a little bit of encouragement.
So Shamim, you tell me what I should do. I'll go by what you said.
Yeah, I can see. Alakananda Bhattakur.
Yeah,
Alakananda Bhattakur.
Actually, Shamim, what I can do is if you are addressing these questions first, so then let me read them and I'll respond to them directly from there. So we'll save a bit.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, definitely, sir. Definitely.
So the first question is from Alakananda Bhattakur from the DCB Girls College, and she asks, can the aggression of female macaques and the reproductive monopolization of males be considered an evolutionary advantage or rather an evolutionary disadvantage? Very nice question. And as I hopefully showed you, that it is clearly an advantage for the individuals practicing it, right? So therefore, in some sense, the fact that the unimale, the single male in the unimale group is able to take over a group of 3 or 4 females and have reproductive monopolization, clearly his chances of paternity go up. On the other hand, what becomes important in evolution is lifetime reproductive success. It's also true that the single male in a unimale group has a very lower tenure. So it may be that they survive as single males in unimale groups for short periods of time, but they increase their reproductive rate within that period, whereas the more relaxed, less aggressive males in multimale groups may have less reproduction in a particular season, but if they're able to survive in the group for long periods of time, it becomes an advantage. The general response to you is that if you have these alternative strategies, whether of males, whether of females, whether it's a reproductive monopolization or regression, you must remember that each behavior carries its own benefits and costs, and different behaviors, different forms of the same behavior, how aggressive you are or how less aggressive you are, will have certain advantages of their own as well as certain costs. And it's a balance that remains in the population. A second question that you have is, at which stage of life, juvenile or reproductive active stage, do you think the bonnet macaques are more physiologically threatened due to anthropogenic intervention? Difficult to say, Alakananda, because what we find is sometimes the young get much more affected simply because there are many more car accidents, they get killed, often in the flurry of competition, they get injured. So clearly they are at a disadvantage. On the other hand, they have access to better food resources. So therefore, if they survive, they become extremely strong and their body conditions are very good. So again, it will really depend on what the current situations are, whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage to be an adult or a young under a particular set of conditions. And as you can clearly imagine, the benefits and costs for being an infant, a juvenile, and an adult will change depending on the food environment, the physical environment, as well as on the social environment that they are in. Nidhi Singh, who asks, is allo-grooming a unique feature of bonnet macaques? Not at all. In fact, allo-grooming is the most common social behavior in all primates. And interestingly, what happens in humans? There is Robin Dunbar, a professor in the University College of London, who long ago suggested that the equivalent of allo-grooming in humans is gossiping. So when we gossip with each other about other people, it's a way in which we are encouraging social bonding to know about other individuals, because allo-grooming is an extremely important social behavior for three reasons. One, it's important to allo-groom to say please. So if you want access to a food resource, you go and allo-groom a dominant female. It's like saying, please, can I have access to that food? It can also be thank you. So when there is a fight and a dominant female comes to support a subordinate female in a fight against another female or a male, immediately after the fight, the subordinate female starts grooming the dominant female, which is in a way saying thank you. And the final one is of sorry, of saying sorry. So when there is aggression between two individuals, the one who loses usually comes and grooms the one who won, or the other way around. So in a way, it's a way of making peace. So allo-grooming, though it started off as a form of removing ectoparasites, actually is now a much more important social bonding mechanism, and therefore very common across primates. Mona Lisa Sonowal, how long do wild macaques typically spend foraging for food? It really varies. If you're in a natural forager, foraging on natural resources, which are much sparse, much more distributed, though bonnet macaques are generalists and they feed across a whole range of food sources, they can spend any time, let's say, between 5 to 6 hours of the day foraging. However, if you're a provisioned macaque, with people giving you rich food, then the time of foraging obviously comes down because the quality of the food improves tremendously. Amrita Krishnatraya, what is the economic importance of macaque radiata? None, as far as I can make out. In some sense, it might be actually a greater sense of a loss. There may be economic losses associated with macaque radiata simply because they come and they raid your crop fields, they may raid your granaries, they may raid your garden, they may come into the kitchen and take away your food. But other than that, there's really not much of economic, there's not much of an economic importance, but then economics is not always the best way to judge the benefits and costs of a particular, of a particular social strategy or of being a particular species, right? Then there's from Madhurima Das, who asks if I could elaborate a little on the tool manufactured by the species. Now, that's a whole talk by itself, but I will just tell you in 2 lines. So what we now see, okay, typically when people have tried to look at tool manufacture and tool use by macaques, we find that the only species that is very good at it is lion-tailed macaque, and they use twigs and other structures to extricate food from below the bark. Bonnet macaques, rhesus macaques are so generalist. They can even eat grass. They don't really need tools to get food. However, we have now seen 3 or 4 kinds of tool use, all of them associated with tool manufacture. And in fact, our observations of tool manufacture in wild bonnet macaques is the only example so far of tool manufacture by a wild monkey of any species anywhere in the world. And I'll tell you quickly what the uses are. A female macaque, which often develop vaginal infection, use a stick to investigate their genitals and scratch themselves. A second use that we find is where we've seen one adult male, she uses a twig as a toothpick, and so removes morsels of food that is stuck in his teeth. And we've seen a third case, of course, where where again there's a female who has been using a stick to scratch her wounds. Right, so when she has a wound, she picks up a stick and she scratches it. Now, interestingly, some of these are manufactured because they may take a longer stick, break it out into smaller pieces, and then use them. I've also seen a female actually pick up Acacia auriculiformis or Eucalyptus globosus leaves. And once you pick up the leaf, she removes the leaf lamina, takes the midrib, breaks the midrib into smaller pieces, and then uses it to scratch her genitals. Right? So that is the case of tool manufacture. And so clearly, what this tells you is that tool manufacture may occur in very, very specific contexts, not necessarily involving food, and which is why we may have missed it. Right. Okay. I don't know whether... Okay, Ankita Kumar asks how a male ended up being in a unimale group or in a multimale group. Is there a spontaneous nature or is there any external factors? Yeah, so that's a good question, Ankita. So we don't really know. What we do know is that some individuals tend to have a greater propensity to leave a group, emigrate out, and many of them, if they are aggressive enough, are able to take over a unimale group. When they take over a unimale group, they then drive away the younger males, and so they become very, very strong. On the other hand, males can, when they leave their group, can also join multimale groups. And once you are in a multimale group, it is possible for you to have shifts in the hierarchy. And we have seen one or two cases where even in a multimale group, one of the dominant males will slowly drive away the other males and it becomes a unimale group, but it's not very stable. These quickly tend to become multimale again, possibly because the large number of females that are there prevents one individual from being able to control such a large group of females. So it's a complicated story. We don't really know what are the driving factors. One could be internal factors. Some are more aggressive than others. Maybe some have a dominance behaviors which are much better manifested in them. So these are the internal factors. Age may play a role. But there may be external factors in the sense opportunistic, right? I'm a male, I have left a group, I'm going along the forest and I suddenly come upon a unimale group with a single adult male. If I'm a very aggressive and a strong male, I might be able to fight and take over the group. So typically, therefore, it could vary depending on the ecological and the social sort of situation that prevails, whether you have a better chance of joining a unimale or a multimale group. One interesting behavior that we've seen that I must mention here is that when there is a unimale group and it gets taken over by other males, either a group of males or by a single male, the original single male in the unimale group will not stay in the group anymore. He will leave. It's almost as if you have been a single male in a unimale group, you cannot coexist with any other males. Is this a cultural sort of trait? Is this a temperament-based behavior? Is this genetic? We have no idea, right? So if I look at the situation, what happens to the sons of unimale single males in unimale groups? Do they have a greater probability of taking over small groups of females and becoming single males themselves? Suppose they do. Suppose over time we are able to show that the sons of unimales become unimales themselves. We still wouldn't know whether it's a genetic trait that the son has inherited from the father, or is it a cultural trait because the young son has learned by observing its father what are the kind of behaviors it can show. So it's very, very difficult to actually distinguish between internal genetic factors and external cultural social learning factors that could influence these behavioral strategies. Right? Okay. Okay, one question from Nidhi Devnath. who says, with your vast experience, how do you see the link between group fission and prevention of inbreeding depression in successful species? Okay, so very nice question, Neetu. I'll tell you why. Because the simplest reason why I think this is a fantastic question is because I don't have the answer. I don't know the answer, but I think what is very important to remember is that we have started doing some genetics work, population genetics with the Bonnet macaques, and what we find remarkably is that it's a completely outbred species, right? So, however, when you have species that are completely outbred, what you cannot rule out is that perhaps in the past, and we have some genetic evidence for this, perhaps in the past, the groups have gone through an inbreeding depression, right? So in some sense, therefore, there was a bottleneck when the individuals became very less, and there was inbreeding depression. Those who had isolation of the recessive mutant alleles may have got eliminated from the population. And those that survive the bottleneck now become highly related to each other, but they are still outbreeding continuously, right? You may know this story of the African leopard, right? In the African leopard, what you find is that all sub-Saharan leopards are related to each other by 99%. Wherever you go across South Africa, south of the Sahara, you will find leopards highly related. How did that happen? It happened perhaps because they went through a bottleneck, and we think that bonnet macaques may have gone through a bottleneck as well. And if we take the story back to about 200,000 years ago, which is how far it seems that the bonnet macaques, when they started crystallizing out as a species, what we find evidence for is female emigration. And that is fascinating. So it does seem that even 200,000 years ago, when the bonnet macaques were forming as a species, female emigration may have been commonly present. However, in today's macaques, we don't see it very often. However, in Bandipur, given the circumstances, we are perhaps seeing the appearance of this behavior as well. Is there any challenges for the mother bonnet to raise their child? Yes, the usual competition, food scarcity, aggression from other individuals, those are the usual stories, right? And so there may be a wide variety of problems they may face. Ishan Bordoloi, what's the litter size and gestation period of Macaca radiata? The litter size, they have usually typically one offspring per year. Sometimes twins are born, but they don't survive. In fact, both tend to die. The gestation period seems to be about 6 to 7 months. And are they a threat for farmers? Yes, but not to the extent that the rhesus macaque is in northern India. The rhesus macaque form much larger groups. They have much more aggressive individuals, and therefore they tend to be much more aggressive, but not so the bonnets. The bonnets are not that much of a threat. Anusha from Nizam College, the female macaques will be helpful with each other or not. The male doesn't take care of anyone. Females do cooperate with each other in some ways. Males do join in if there's a predatory threat. So if I threatened any of the individuals, all of them would get together. But however, you must remember that there is no cooperation as such. There is no allomothering. No female will take care of the young others. We saw adoption, but we saw 2 cases of adoption by males, never by a female. So that's also very interesting. And the other point I wanted to make is that there is no food sharing. So if there is food starvation, if there is low amounts of food, the offspring may die, but the mothers will not share food with their young. In fact, there is no food sharing in this species at all. Right. I think somebody, the name is not there, asked, is homosexuality observed in bonnet macaques? Okay, so this is an interesting question. We have seen 2 or 3 cases of male homosexuality, but these were amongst juveniles and subadults at a very young age. And the way we saw that was because we saw a mounting of a male of another male, which is a common feature. They mount each other all the time, but that's a dominance behavior. However, we saw a male mounting another male and showing copulatory thrusts, pelvic thrusts, which is a sign of a sexual behavior. And we saw that only temporarily in 2 or 3 pairs of young males, but that disappeared as they grew. So we did not see any case of permanent male homosexuality, and we didn't see it in females either. Females never mount each other, But we saw 2 adult females in one particular troop who were very strongly associated with each other. They would spend all their time with each other. And over 4 years, I saw only on 2 occasions, on one occasion about 2 or 3 days, on another occasion 2 or 3 days again, when one of these females who was dominant to the other repeatedly mounted her and made copulatory thrusts, sexual thrusts. She did it over a period of 2 or 3 days, stopped. Again, another year, she did it over 2 or 3 days and stopped. I've never ever seen female mounting in any other group, and I haven't seen male as well. However, let me mention here that sometimes homosexuality, whether we see it or not, depends on how we define it, right? Now, the male bonding is very strong in this species, as I said, but the patterns of friendship in them can be very, very different. In one pair of individuals, A and B, let's say in one troop, I found they were very strongly bonded. In fact, they left the group together, they came back together, and they were very physically attached as well. So I never saw any sexual mount. There was no sexual behavior between them, but they would groom each other a lot. They would sleep huddled together, and there was a lot of physical contact between them. There was another pair, C and D, in the same group, who also were very closely bonded, but they never groomed each other. They never slept together. What, however, they would do is they would always feed very close to each other, and they would move together within the group together. And if one of them was attacked by any other male, immediately the second one would come and help him. So here the friendship manifested in non-contact ways through feeding together and defending each other from an aggressor. But in the other 2 males, it was a lot of cuddling and grooming, but no sexual behavior as such. So it just tells you how remarkably unique each of these individuals or their relationships are, so that we get to see a tremendous variation in these strategies. But we need to observe it. If we don't observe it, we will never discover it. Yes, Salma, thank you very much. Okay, I think I'm done with the questions in the chat box, Shamim.
Sir, there are 2 questions from the YouTube. Can I go with that?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so Prastuti Bhattacharya from Cotton University, she is asking, sir, what's the possible way to deal with the weed macaques, research specifically within the bracket, coexistence of management plans like sterilization, translocation, etc. Okay. And she also added that the question is specifically for weed macaques in urban area.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much, Prastuti. That's an extremely important question, and the whole country is trying to find solutions to it. If you ask me, given my experience of working with them, there is no way of managing them because, it's just not possible. So my first response to your question is that we have to think of coexistence. Unless you want to remove all these monkeys, which I think ethically, morally, legally, scientifically, we are not in a position to do, right? We are not like Singapore, which will one day decide to remove all crows, right? And they've done that. They tried to do it with pigeons. They couldn't. Europe, Western Europe, has removed all street dogs. There is not a single street dog in any European city. However, our sense of morality, our ethical practices within our country are quite remarkably different, where, I have seen individuals losing their family members or losing all their resources to elephants, for example, and yet they will tell you that they are also God's creatures. They have to live as well. So find ways in which we don't have conflict, but don't kill them, don't take them away. And you know that very well, right? Even in zoos, for example, if a lion trainer or a lion keeper or a tiger keeper is killed accidentally, we never put down the animal. We isolate them, but we never kill them. So in some sense, the kind of ethics that we follow make us, it appears that we will never be able to remove all these pest or weed macaques, right? So therefore, that will not happen. Now, coming to certain strategies, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, these 2 states have started sterilizing rhesus macaques. Now, this is logistically a very difficult task, because you must remember that even if there is one fertile male, non-sterilized male, he can potentially fertilize all the females. So therefore, given the social system, therefore it's important that if we are sterilizing, we have to sterilize females, right? Which is an expensive process. It's a much more difficult process. And given the sheer numbers and the resources that we require and the time we require, it just is not possible, right? So therefore, sterilization may be something we should look at. However, there have been no studies on what the impact of sterilization on them leads to, and therefore, ethically, can we sterilize them? Should we do it? What is the impact on their lives is something we know very little about. You mentioned another term, translocation, and there I can tell you I'm completely against it for two reasons. One, when you translocate individuals, from the perspective of the macaques themselves, you're completely rupturing their family ties, you're breaking down their social bonds, you're separating mothers from young, and therefore it becomes an ethically extremely difficult decision to say that I'm going to trap them. If you're going to trap them and translocate them, let me tell you, perhaps it's better for them if they die a painless death, right? Rather than being removed to a new place where they have no idea where the food sources are, where the predators are, they are separated from their family and close kin. Under these conditions, forcing them to survive is perhaps a greater punishment than inflicting a painless death on them. So translocation from the macaques' point of view is absolutely devastating. There is a second reason why I'm completely against translocation, and that is from the perspective of humans. Have you seen how translocation happens? The city center, which has a very powerful voice, will translocate macaques to the suburbs. People in the suburbs will trap these macaques and take them to the villages. The villagers will then take them out into some other region. But of course, in the rural areas, there's generally much more tolerance for these macaques, and therefore they are not likely to translocate, but it's usually the rich and the powerful, the urban middle class, which tends to translocate. But when you translocate the macaques, what are you doing? You're transferring the problem to someone else. I don't know whether you know the famous story of Asola Bhatti. Asola Bhatti is a small wildlife sanctuary on the outskirts of Delhi. And all the monkeys from the city center of Delhi, from the NCR region, was transferred to Asola Bhatti. Soon, Asola Bhatti ended up with 5,000, 6,000 rhesus macaques. And naturally, the sanctuary can't hold them. So the immediate neighboring regions and the outskirts of Delhi surrounding the Asola Bhatti sanctuary had a tremendous rise in macaque-human conflict. So what have the people of Connaught Circus, what have the politicians of the North Block or South Block done? They have taken their monkeys, who are a pest and a pain for them, and they have transferred them to people who are perhaps poor, who are economically challenged, who don't have enough strong a voice, and the macaque problem now becomes their problem, right? So where are we going to translocate them? You can't translocate them into forests because you will carry infections, you will carry TB, you will carry pneumonia, you will carry, maybe in today's world, you will carry COVID-19 into the forests when you actually transfer macaques. So translocation is out. So if we can do limited sterilization, we can try maybe removing some problem individuals, bringing them into captivity, but who will take care of them? Where are the resources available? Who will enrich their lives in these conditions? I think it's just absolutely impossible to think of any kind of management. I know it's a major problem, especially with rhesus macaques in Himachal and Uttarakhand, where entire fields are laid bare. But I think it's a hazard of modern day life, that we have changed our environment so much that the macaques, the elephants, are now in the cities. They are in the periphery of the towns. They have nowhere to go. And now we are facing this problem, and we have no strategy by which we can control them. I'm sorry if I sounded very negative or pessimistic, but I, as an as an individual who's been studying monkeys for a very long time, I don't see any kind of strategy by which we will be able to control their numbers, frankly.
So there is another questions from YouTube.
Yes.
Last questions, it seems. Dikita Neog she asked, so how close macaques? I mean, she said, to what extent macaques are close to human?
Okay, so um, so basically, if you look at the non-human primates, there are three groups, right? The one are the prosimians, which are the solitary nocturnal primates. You have the slender loris in Assam and other northeastern states amongst the prosimians, and you have the slender loris, the slow loris in Assam, the slender loris in South India. These are the prosimians. They are perhaps the most primitive in the sense of early origin amongst the primates. The second group of primates are the monkeys, and the monkeys include two broad groups. You have the leaf-eating colobines or the langurs, and you have the more omnivorous macaques in India. But the macaques also have, these are called cercopithecines as opposed to the colobines. And in general, it is believed that the colobines branched out first. The baboons, the guenons, the mangabeys, the macaques, these are the cercopithecines. They branched out later. And from the cercopithecine tree, actually the third group of primates, the apes, evolved. And you possibly know that you have the smaller apes, the gibbons, of which we have the eastern and the western Hulok gibbon in Assam and in the northeast. And the greater apes, we have the orangutan, which is a solitary species of Southeast Asia. We have the gorillas of Africa. We have the bonobos, the chimpanzees, and the humans. And the chimpanzees and the humans actually are the last to diverge. Even the bonobos are less related to the chimpanzees than the chimpanzees are related to us. So the apes are all very closely related genetically. The macaques represent the cercopithecine groups, a common ancestor of which gave rise to the apes. So they are fairly distant from us as compared to the apes. But what is fascinating about the macaques is that their sociality is extremely complex. And the social complexity artificially resembles that of humans. If you look at the apes, the orangutans are, of course, solitary, so they don't have sociality in that sense. The gorillas live in fairly large groups, but their social behavior is very, very simple. Their social strategies are simple. The chimpanzees and the bonobos are, of course, socially much more complex, perhaps much more reminiscent of the humans. But it's fascinating that when you go down to some of the macaques, and especially the weed macaques, you find a kind of social complexity that is comparable to that of the apes, though phylogenetically they are a bit far from us. And sorry, Shamin, there's one question from Devyani Sonuwal in the chat box. How long do macaques live? Typically, the bonnet macaque has a life of about 18 to 20 years, at least that, but we have seen individuals about 22 or 23 years or more. So, that's the kind of a ballpark figure, which is why our project was meant to last for 20 to 25 years, so that we could cover the entire life of at least one individual who was born when we began our work and will most probably die by the time we finish our work. However, of course, it must be remembered that in the wild, longevity tends to be less than in captivity. You have much prolonged lives in captivity than in the wild. There's also a question from Priyanka Sharma. Do macaques abandon their members? I don't think they actively abandon them, but they do sometimes avoid or ignore individuals who may have an infection, who may be badly injured. What often tends to happen is in the evening, for example, when they're going up to their roosting trees, those who are injured or ill may not be able to keep pace with them and they will fall behind. Unfortunately, nobody is going to stop for them. Nobody's going to come back. But I will also take that back, because in some cases we have seen if an injured monkey is below a tree and other monkeys have gone up the tree, if I approach this injured individual too close, the monkeys from the tree often come right down. So they are still concerned about the individual, but there is usually no helping. So there may not be empathy by which they will actually help the individuals in some ways, but they may not directly abandon them either. So abandonment may not happen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Well, sir, we are moving to listen a little bit from the Zoological Society of Assam.
Sure.
So for this matter, may I request General Secretary Professor Jagan Chandra Kolita to do this honor. Sir, to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Manos, or Dr. Semim, because I know that you are doing a great job by connecting a great scientist, a great scholar to the young generation of this part of India and as a whole to the Indian context. I am very happy to see the participants from across the nation as well as from abroad. We are thankful to you, Professor Anindya Sinha. You are an expert with international repute and you are a hard-working person. I met you in our Primate Research International seminar organized by Dr. Dilip Sethi and his team. Today, I am so happy to listen to you. I feel myself as very fortunate because when you are talking about these particular spaces on this earth, you are also talking about the ethics, the morals, and the Indian ethics. We cannot remove them, though many of the nations can take that type of decision. But as a conservation biologist, you are showing the path, very right direction to our young generation scientists who have keen interest in this particular type of field of studies. Because our part of India, as you are expert in here also, that biological hotspot. So this hotspot means a lot for us. And we are standing and sitting on the hotspot at right now. So therefore, our people, our young generation, they have more responsibility. So what Dr. Semim has been doing today, that he has been trying to connect people like you and our Dr. Narayan Sharma also making a very good team like our Dr. Dilip Sethi and our colleges, which are very important in this, our country, that a college, which is a girls' college, Devi Sharan Borua College, and the principal, Dr. Jinamoni Bhuya, is very dynamic. I visited to many universities with her and her team in China and Japan and in United Kingdom. I saw her interest in research. As you know, that research only can solve our problem. And what you are doing today, you are encouraging our students to do more research because we need effective management strategies. And who can do that? The people who are highly qualified, highly educated, and motivated, and also dedicated, like you. And we consider you as our guardian, the guide, the philosopher, who are helping the entire northeast region of India. So our society, the Zoological Society of Assam, we have honorable president here, Riyaboto Lokor. We have very senior advisor like Dr. Subrata Sharma, who was a professor in highly esteemed Cotton University. She just retired. And we have many others to very senior to young generation researchers and students. What we do, just I want to tell you very briefly, we connect people, organizing through webinar. When Semim told me about you, I congratulate his DCB college family, including very senior professors there, and my student, he is a very senior now, Dr. Mohan Hazarika. So all are, what they are doing, they are connecting person like you. And this is the beginning, they will be doing more. And that is one of the objectives of Zoological Society of Assam, to support the colleges, to support the professors working in the colleges and the young minds, those who are there in the colleges. And most importantly, the girls, because as you know, they are very important in social context to solve many social issues, environmental issues, women empowerment should be there. As ZSA was established in 1983 with our very dynamic professors at that time. So this society also contributing more than 130 PPT, which are voice recorded, prepared by professors like Semim and like many, like senior our Subrata ma'am, and my guide from London, Professor Stuart Milligan. He also contributed 15 lectures for whom for undergraduate students in colleges and in PG, those who are doing zoology, undergraduate and master degree. So that way we have 2 YouTube channels. Today we have 2 YouTube channels and more than 50,000 viewers, and people are getting benefits out of this. And your lecture also, as it is recorded, and if you permit, we will put in our YouTube channel with taking permission from you as also from DCB college, highly esteemed college. We respect them, and many other organizing committee members are there. We will take all necessary permissions and ultimately we will put into the YouTube channel. We also want that you and our all resource persons who contributed in webinars to be the academic advisors to our colleges. Suppose you can guide us academically, their college can also take a decision in the governing body that our Professor Anindya Sinha will be our academic advisor right from now. And that way you can help because you know Northeast of India is very important for in the context of primate. We have Gibbon Wildlife Sanctuary and also Gibbon Conservation Center. And you can help us a lot by doing that. Finally, ZSA want to thank you. We are so much grateful and we hope that you will be always with us. We thank Dr. Semim Rahman and also his team, including all faculty members, Dr. Gina Moni, the principal, governing body, and the Society of Zorhat, because that was established by the society, that college. We are also extremely happy that all the people from IIT Guwahati, University Osmania, many universities from south to the north, east to the west, they are connecting, even people from Iser and Niger. We thank all of them. We thank all our members. We thank young students because you are very important, my dear student friends. Because if you want to work with our expert, Semim Rahman has developed a connection. He is opening the door today. So ZSA will always assist you, Semim. Go forward, and with these few words, I also thank your IQAC for efficient management of giving the technical support. So I cannot name all of them, but I know that what you are doing it, we will be keeping all records, and some of them will go to the newsprint also, because our Songtanti Devi has been writing, and Semim will examine it. Finally, we'll give it to the Assam Tribune, highly circulated English daily of northeastern region of India. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. No, I think what you said, Dr. Kalita, was so important because I think one of the reasons why in India our research has not taken the kind of pace that many of the Western nations have is because our research seems to be restricted to some of these research institutions, right? I think in the US or in Western Europe, the universities and the colleges are the centers of research and learning. And I think we definitely need to develop our colleges and universities much, much more in terms of our research endeavors. And what you said is absolutely right. If you want to look at our biodiversity, if you want to look at conservation, I can assure you that leading scientists from research institutions will never come down and bother, right? It's ultimately ourselves, our students, our teachers who are in particular regions of the country, especially in the Northeast. We have to take care of our flora and fauna. We have to be involved in it. And Narayan will tell you, Narayan and I have had many debates. And one of the things, and I can proudly say this and I can take credit, is that I kept telling Narayan all through that you came down from Assam to work with me in Karnataka. But if you don't go back to Assam, I will consider it my personal failure that I have not been able to inspire you enough to go back to where you belong from, because you know the country, you know the people, you know you know it's flora and fauna. If you don't take care of it, nobody else will. Nobody will come from Bangalore. I love Assam and I keep going there, but I will not be able to spend my entire life there. So each of us, I think, has to take this responsibility of taking care of our own flora, fauna, our ecosystems, our habitats, try and protect them as much as is possible. Nobody else will do it for you. We have to do it ourselves. And so thank you very much for your extremely kind words. And I'm always here as a friend. And Narayan will tell you how much I love coming to Assam. And now that I'm associated with Cotton University, I want to come once, twice a year, as much as is possible. And I would love to come to the college as well, to the DCB college. I think it would be wonderful. And thank you very much for this honor. And Shamim, thank you very much for your persistence and your sort of enthusiasm without which I don't think I could have, been here and spend so much time with you. Thank you very much again. And of course, the Zoological Society of Assam.
Thank you, sir. This is the silver lining of this pandemic, sir, that we can connect to you and the people sitting far apart. So this is the positivity in midst of this stress.
Right.
So,
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. It was very kind. And if you really enjoyed the talk, you'll call me again. I will wait for that.
Certainly, sir. Kalita sir, shall we move to the vote of thanks, or is there any other person to put their comments?
No, our Priyavotal Locker, sir. Priyavotal Locker president is there. You can.
Sir is there. Yeah. May I request President sir to do this honor? President, Zoological Society of Assam. Locker sir is there.
Sir.
Priyavotal Locker sir is there.
Can you check in the list? I think, Locker sir. Can you hear me, sir? Or maybe having network problem. Okay, go forward. Network problem. We have lots of network problem in this region. I am also keeping my video off. You might have noticed that when I would vote, then it is difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Samin, go to the next.
Yeah, Subrata Vaidya, would you like to put briefly anything, any comment?
Few words, Vaidya.
Subrata Vaidya. Or anyone else?
Vaidya,
very briefly. Vaidya said. But there is a pause with.
No, our Locker sir is there, President sir. Yeah.
Hello.
Problem.
Very good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Very good afternoon. I'm really happy to listen to Professor Anindya Sinha. Really, it is very interesting, the social behavior of a macaque. And it can relate with human behaviors and human social natures. And they have doing a lot of work to be done yet. And in Guwahati also, particularly in the Jalukbari University area where our Kolita resides, they have also a lot of problem with macaque.
Yes.
And there is still one Umanando. There are very few langurs are there, golden langurs. Then there in near Jorhat, in Dergaon, there is a temple where all the activities are dominating by this macaque. So there are a lot of avenues for studying these animals and connecting with people. And I think in these areas, Professor Sinha can help our students, our researchers, our teachers. And the Jorhat can be, particularly the DCB Girls College, can be a hub for this sort of work. And I think Samim will take the lead and will take your Sinha's help and do the research in particular in neglecting and other areas. And I'm really thankful to Dr. Jinamuni Bhuya Dora, Principal of DCB Girls College, to initiate this work, this sort of seminars and webinars, and hope when the days will come good, the more seminars will be held in real platform, not in virtual platform, and we will have them. I thank Samim, then other workers or IQAC and other co-workers of organizing this webinar. And I really am very much lucky to hear Professor Sinha. He's really very nicely explained the social structure, the behavior of the monkeys and all of that. Thank you very much. Really. And about our Zoology Society, Julian Skulta has said a lot of it. I don't want to repeat all these things. Thank you very much. Once again, I hope to meet you in future too. Namaste. Namaskar.
Thank you very much for your very kind words. And let me tell you that Jorhat, of course, is very, very close to me because most of my wonderful years in Assam have been spent in the Holongopar Gibbon Wildlife Sanctuary, so close to Jorhat. And my sister and my brother-in-law have lived all their lives in Assam. My brother-in-law was born and brought up in Assam. He studied in Toklai. He studied in Toklai. He was in tea all through. And so right from the time I was 9 or 10 years old, I have spent almost twice or thrice a year I've been in Assam. So it's home.
You know each and everything in Assam, I think.
Sorry?
You know each and everything in Assam, I think.
I don't know each and everything, but I love being there. And actually, let me also tell you that there is a new project that I am writing for, which actually is something different from the macaques. I'm actually studying the Mahout-elephant relationship, and one of my study sites is in Assam. And in addition to actually trying to understand the bond or the relationship between the mahouts and elephants, I'm also interested in performance. So I'm very interested in the music, in the songs that have been composed about the mahout-elephant relationship, or songs that mahouts themselves sing of the elephants. And so if anyone here in this audience can help me in the future, so over the next 2-3 years, I might be coming to Assam much more often.
I would like to suggest you to visit Gauripur.
Yes.
Gauripur, there they say Primate Biographie's families.
Yes, I will do that. Yes.
Then they are one.
The name is from Gauripur.
Oh, sure.
Yes, sir.
From Gauripur. Oh, wonderful.
I'm born and raised up in Gauripur.
Okay.
Yes.
So you know it very well.
Yeah.
So Pramotesh Barua ji was actually a very close friend of my parents. So I have heard. So they visited Gauripur. They went to the Khedda.
His daughter.
So that was a long time ago. But I want to renew those connections, Shamim. So I will need your help, I think.
That will help
Definitely,
you, I think.
Shamim is the right person.
Help you. I can also help you.
Oh, thank you.
I am Subrata Sharma.
Yes.
Because Parvati is just like my sister.
Oh, wonderful.
Pramotesh Barua's brother, Kritish Barua.
Yes.
He was a MLA there.
Correct.
And also they are our family friends.
Oh, wonderful. I shall come and meet you.
Yes,
I shall come and
can
meet
connect
you, Dr. Sharma.
with Parvati.
Okay, wonderful. It'll be such an honor if I can.
Okay, I will talk to Narayan also, and I will talk to Shamim also.
Wonderful. Thank you. I don't know.
Whatever way I can help you, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. I am really grateful.
You have given a very lucid
very
lecture.
nice, madam.
So yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
From all
Thank
of
you.
us.
You're very kind.
Okay.
Very, very kind.
It's very nice to listen from Lahokar sir and Subrata Baido.
Yes.
So may we now move to the last part of the webinar, that is a vote of thanks. May I request Jona Dr. Chaudhary madam to kindly to do this honor.
Good evening, everyone. Let me take the opportunity to convey our sincere gratitude on behalf of Department of Zoology, Behavioural Girls College, and the entire organizing committee, Professor Anindya Sinha, who has accepted our request for delivering a speech in spite of his busy schedule. We are thankful, sir, for your valuable speech. We convey our acknowledgement to Principal Dr. Jinamani for organizing such a program. We are thankful to the faculties of Zoology Department, IQAC Coordinator, Behavioural Girls College for their support. We are thankful to Bahari Dole, Dr. Vikas Sharma, for providing their helping hand to the coordinator for organizing the webinar. Our sincere acknowledgement to the President of Zoological Society of Assam, Mr. Priyaprato Lakkar, Working President Dr. Balendra Kumar Das, and General Secretary Professor Jugan Chandra Kalita, and other ZSA members for providing support and guidance. At last, but not the least, may I acknowledge the participants from different parts of the country for showing their interest in the webinar, and especially the students.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, Anindya sir. Thank you, Lankar sir. Thank you, Kalita sir. Subhota Baido, thank you. Thank you all the students for your participations. So, Kalita sir, I think we can now sign off.
Yeah, we can sign off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll meet
And
again.
I shall come back. I shall come back and see all of you.
Yes,
I can promise you that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's wonderful webinar.
Thank you. Thank you. It's
Very
because
nice.
you are wonderful, it becomes wonderful. I think because of all of us.
All of us.
Not
yeah.
just one person.
All are wonderful people. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
We'll keep in touch. Thank you.
Sure.
Sure. Thank you. Samim, goodbye.
Goodbye, sir. Take care, sir.
Thank you.
বৰ ভাল লাগিলে
Thank you, sir.
খুব ভাল
Thank
হৈছে
you.
যে
Yeah.
ডিসিবি কলেজ জিন্দাবাদ হৈ গৈছে আজি
Thank you, sir.
DCB college Zindabad. Really nice.
Very nice.
Nice to know that he had a long connection with Assam.
Technical disturbance, no technical disturbance.
Not at all. And the questions were excellent.
Excellent.
So,
Questions were excellent.
The
really.
questions were excellent, extremely thoughtful. So clearly, we underestimate our undergraduate students. They are all wonderful. They are all bright. They just need that opportunity to be able to think and work. I think that's what is most important.
Yeah, exactly.
Their minds must be ignited, no?
Yes, I think so.
Ignition is necessary. Ignition is necessary.
Yes.
Yeah, today they are ignited. I know
I'm
because
sure they will be
looking at their queries, they are so excited. Yeah.
No, I think we should all work together. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Goodbye, sir.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye,
Take
ma'am.
care, sir. Take care.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma. I'll come and look you up when I come to Assam next time.
Yeah.